Visceral fat is a hidden form of body fat stored deep inside the abdominal cavity. It surrounds vital organs, including the liver, pancreas, and intestines, affecting their normal function. Unlike visible belly fat, visceral fat cannot be pinched or easily noticed externally physically. This fat type releases inflammatory compounds that increase disease risk throughout the entire body. Higher visceral fat levels are strongly linked to diabetes, heart disease, and early mortality. It disrupts hormonal signaling, insulin sensitivity, and metabolic regulation far more than subcutaneous fat. Understanding what visceral fat is represents the first critical step toward eliminating it effectively. Unlike subcutaneous fat, visceral fat responds quickly to targeted lifestyle changes when habits improve. It is metabolically active, making it easier to mobilize during calorie restriction and lifestyle interventions. Unlike other fat types, visceral fat cannot be surgically removed safely in most cases. However, it shrinks rapidly when insulin levels and inflammation are reduced consistently over time. This makes visceral fat dangerous yet highly responsive to proper metabolic interventions and habits. With the right plan, significant reductions can occur within weeks, not years, for many adults. This responsiveness creates an opportunity for meaningful health improvements relatively quickly with consistency applied. People consuming identical calories can store very different amounts of visceral fat over time. This variation occurs because food quality strongly influences hormonal and metabolic responses. Highly processed foods trigger insulin spikes that promote visceral fat storage preferentially. Whole foods create different signaling that favors fat oxidation rather than central fat accumulation. Calories describe energy intake, but not how the body partitions that energy internally. Hormones, inflammation, and nutrient composition determine where excess energy is ultimately stored. Understanding this explains why calorie-focused diets often fail to reduce visceral belly fat. Studies show saturated fat consumption leads to significantly greater visceral fat gain over time. In controlled trials, participants consuming saturated fats accumulated more abdominal fat internally overall consistently. Polyunsaturated fats result in less visceral fat storage and support greater lean mass development. Fat type influences how the body stores energy beyond simple calorie totals alone daily. This explains why equal-calorie diets can produce very different abdominal fat outcomes biologically. Reducing saturated fat intake shifts fat storage away from dangerous visceral depots within body. This dietary adjustment directly improves metabolic risk markers linked to visceral obesity over time. Excessive daily saturated fat intake promotes visceral fat accumulation through unfavorable metabolic signaling pathways. Most people unknowingly exceed recommended saturated fat levels through processed foods and frequent dining. Health authorities suggest moderation rather than elimination to maintain hormonal balance and dietary sustainability. Problems arise when saturated fats dominate daily intake without sufficient unsaturated fat balance present. Consistently high intake shifts fat storage toward visceral regions, increasing long-term health risks. Balancing saturated fats with polyunsaturated and monounsaturated sources reduces visceral fat accumulation over time. This approach improves metabolic health without requiring extreme dietary restriction or complete fat avoidance. Replacing fatty meats with leaner cuts significantly lowers daily saturated fat intake levels overall. Lean proteins reduce visceral fat risk while preserving muscle mass during calorie deficits periods. Fatty fish provide omega-3 fats that support healthier fat distribution patterns systemically overall. Using olive oil, nuts, and seeds replaces saturated fats with protective unsaturated fat sources. These practical swaps improve lipid profiles, insulin sensitivity, and visceral fat outcomes significantly long-term. Small dietary changes repeated daily compound into substantial visceral fat reductions over weeks consistently. Sustainable swaps matter more than perfection when reducing saturated fat intake successfully long-term overall. Added sugars, particularly fructose, strongly increase visceral fat storage through unique metabolic pathways. Fructose is processed primarily in the liver, promoting fat creation and insulin resistance rapidly. Excess fructose bypasses normal appetite regulation, leading to higher overall energy intake daily. Sugary drinks deliver large fructose doses without promoting fullness or satiety effectively. Processed foods often hide significant added sugars, contributing unknowingly to visceral fat gain. These sources elevate inflammation, liver fat, and metabolic dysfunction over time consistently. Reducing added sugar intake is one of the fastest ways to lower visceral fat levels. Fruit contains fructose, but also fiber and water, which dramatically slows sugar absorption rate. Fiber increases chewing time, digestion, speed reduction, and fullness signals in the brain centers. This combination makes consuming excessive calories from whole fruit very difficult naturally for humans. Water content lowers energy density compared to sweetened beverages and processed snacks consumed daily. Studies consistently show fruit consumption correlates with lower visceral fat and better health outcomes. Whole fruit supports metabolic health, rather than driving visceral fat accumulation chronically in adults. Context matters more than fructose alone when evaluating fruit impact on body fat storage. Increasing protein intake naturally reduces overall calorie consumption by enhancing satiety and appetite control. Protein slows digestion, stabilizes blood sugar, and reduces cravings for sugary foods throughout day. Higher protein intake supports fat loss while preserving lean muscle mass during calorie deficits. Replacing sugar with protein shifts hormonal signals toward fat mobilization rather than fat storage. This change lowers insulin spikes that drive visceral fat accumulation within the abdominal region. Protein-rich meals improve metabolic rate and diet adherence over extended weight loss periods. These effects create favorable conditions for reducing visceral belly fat consistently over time. Replacing sugary snacks and drinks with protein alternatives effectively reduces visceral fat risk significantly. Protein-based swaps increase satiety, stabilize blood sugar, and reduce cravings throughout the day. These changes lower insulin spikes that promote visceral fat storage after meals consistently daily. Choosing protein snacks helps maintain energy levels and prevents overeating later during the day. Simple substitutions repeated daily create meaningful long-term reductions in visceral fat levels overall. Consistency matters more than perfection when implementing protein-based food swaps consistently over time. Small dietary decisions compound steadily into significant metabolic improvements within weeks for most people. Visceral fat is usually the first fat mobilized when the body enters a calorie deficit. Even modest weight loss creates hormonal conditions that strongly favor visceral fat reduction. This occurs because visceral fat is more metabolically active than subcutaneous fat tissue. Reducing calories lowers insulin, allowing stored visceral fat to be released efficiently. Small, consistent deficits often produce significant health improvements without extreme dieting efforts. Optimal calorie intake varies significantly between individuals based on size, activity, hormones, and metabolism. Tracking intake helps identify calorie targets that support consistent fat loss without excessive restriction. Visceral fat responds quickly once the correct calorie range is established and maintained daily. Spot reduction is impossible, but visceral fat reacts well to overall metabolic demand increases. Exercise triggers hormones that mobilize visceral fat more readily than subcutaneous fat stores. Higher intensity movement creates stronger fat, releasing signals throughout the abdominal region. Combining personalized calorie targets with appropriate exercise accelerates visceral fat reduction efficiently. Moderate to high-intensity cardiovascular exercise is highly effective for reducing visceral fat levels. Interval training elevates fat, mobilizing hormones more than steady-state exercise alone. Short, intense sessions create strong metabolic signals that target visceral fat preferentially. Training above 75% of maximum heart rate produces optimal hormonal responses. These workouts improve insulin sensitivity and accelerate fat oxidation after exercise completion. Brief, structured sessions reduce visceral fat, without requiring excessive training volume weekly. Proper recovery ensures benefits without excessive stress on the nervous system overall. Interval training should be limited because recovery demands are high and frequency increases injury risk. Daily walking provides low-stress movement that significantly contributes to visceral fat reduction over time. Sustainable cardio habits allow consistent calorie expenditure without overwhelming the nervous system chronically overall. Nutrition, calorie control, and regular movement work together synergistically to reduce visceral fat effectively, consistently. Consistency maintained over 30 days produces visible reductions in visceral belly fat for most people. Small daily actions compound quickly when diet, exercise, and recovery are aligned properly together now. Follow this channel for science-based strategies that make visceral fat loss sustainable long-term.